two brothers, Jack and Bobby Charlton, are an indispensable part of England's 1966 World Cup legend. Bobby was the naturally gifted footballer who glided effortlessly round the pitch and scored spectacular goals. He won every honour in the game. Everything seemed to come easy to him, except handling the fame his talent brought. Jack was just the opposite. He'd had to fight every inch of the way for his success. He was a ruthless, uncompromising defender who gloried in stopping other people playing the beautiful game. And when he eventually won a share of the limelight, he milked it for all it was worth.
And I bit it. I didn't actually bite, I just got a hold of it with my teeth. And I wouldn't let go as a corner kid.
And it was Jack who blossomed into an archetypal English icon. And over in Ireland, a most unlikely patron saint. Despite their shared roots and mutual passion for the game, the nation's most famous sporting brothers were destined to grow apart. Few would have predicted how far. The Charltons came from Ashington, a pit village in Northumberland. Dad was a miner all his working life.
The house was continually full of people. The house was open, the door was never locked, and neighbours would come in and friends and relatives. I mean, that's what the lads grew up with. That was their heritage. Mother ran the money, she ran everything. And Dad was quite happy just to give her his wages, get pocket money and carry on with his life.
Jack was born in 1935, the oldest of 4 boys. Bobby arrived 2 years later. 2 more brothers, Gordon and Tom, came along later still. Yet with 4 boys fighting for their mother's attention, it was Jack who was Sissy's favourite.
He would be upstairs pelting an air gun at the ladies' windows across the road, or squirting the girl next door with a squirter gun. And poor Bobby was so quiet, he would be sitting here with his books.
Jack's relationship with Mother was special. He really was the apple of Mother's eye. I mean, I would have liked to think that as the youngest son, I would have been the apple of her eye, but I wasn't. Jack was.
But no apron strings stopped Jack escaping whenever he could into the countryside. Bird nesting, snaring rabbits, or night fishing off a beach at New Biggin. Sometimes Bobby came in tow, but he was no fisherman.
He's a terrible fisherman. He said, would you put me a worm on? And he was very chicken, he was. And he once caught a fish, the only fish I ever saw him catch. And he bent over and he had hold of the line. And he picked a nice trout, it was about £1, and he picked it out of the water again. He said, look at that! And it dropped off. And he was shouting at me, but it counts, doesn't it? And I said, no.
The Charlton family weren't particular footballers, but the Milburn family were. That's my mother's side.
From a slide rule Finney pass, Jack Milburn makes it 2-0.
My mother used to talk about football all the time. She was built like a footballer, and she was very, very interested in football, being a girl with 4 brothers who were professionals. 2
of Sissy's brothers played for Leeds, but the star of the Milburn dynasty was her cousin Jack, of Newcastle and England.
Unstoppable Milburn puts them 3 up.
If Jack Charlton had inherited his mother's outgoing personality, it was Bobby who appeared to have inherited the Milburn footballing genes.
I can remember Bobby coming from Beatrice Street, we were playing football, and there's Bobby with his Wellington boots on. He was standing on the touchline saying, "Again, let's have a game." And I mean, he was younger than us, about 3 years younger than us. And we knew what he was like he was fantastic. So we wouldn't let him have a game.
In 1953, Bobby won a place as an England schoolboy, and it was just a matter of time before the big clubs found their way to Ashington.
There were queues of people, literally queues of people standing with cameras and notepads and people saying that they were from Manchester and Burnley and goodness knows where. And I'm thinking, well, I know what Bob's going. He's going to go to Manchester United.
You have to get up early these days to be the first to spot any outstanding talent in schoolboy football. In my case, Manchester United were up and about long before anybody else.
We were joining what was talked about even then as the Hollywood of football. They were known as the Busby Babes.
In drab post-war England, Matt Busby's babes were pin-up material. And Bobby blossomed in the limelight.
Bob was very much a fun-loving lad, and he'd terrify us kids, my elder brother and me, Gordon. We'd be in bed, and Bob would be at the bottom of the stairs here. I'm coming to get you, and he would thump on the stairs, and we'd be terrified, and he'd have a great laugh, and he'd bring his mates, and his mates were good lads. David Pegg and Eddie Coleman used to come with him. They loved to come up Dashington and take part in this daft family, the Charltons.
For Jack, the future looked very different. When he left school, he seemed destined to follow his father down the mine with his mate Jack Lothian.
It was horrifying. It was nightmarish. It was absolutely, completely black, and it was frightening.
I was only frightened once. The fella came out and he said, we're just going to fire the shots now. And I remember put my hands over my ears and it went like the concussion. And I thought, Jesus, really? And we couldn't see anything for 5 minutes. And you just had to stay there till the dust settled. You know, and I thought, I want to get out of here.
Fortunately, me and Jack, we got out of it. He had contacts at Leeds United with his uncles, and he got a trial.
But life at Second Division Leeds was no glamour posting. It took 2 years of hard graft before Jack got a sniff of first-team action.
He'd have to do a bit of sweeping up on the stands, and then he'd have to do something around the field, you know, like cut it, something like that, and clean the boots for the first-team players. He was cheeky to me, yeah. I used to give him a right hand now and again.
As soon as he made his debut, he got posted off on national service. It would be 2 years before he played for the first team again. Bobby did his national service close to Old Trafford. Nothing seemed to hinder his inexorable rise to footballing stardom. But then in 1958, his life was to change forever. That year, Manchester United became the first English club to take part in the European Cup and won their way through to the semi-finals. Their opponents were Red Star, and the second leg was played in Belgrade.
United had been quick to take the lead. This was through a goal by Dennis Violet. In the first half, the British team were making rings round the Yugoslavs, and they scored their second thanks to Bobby Charlton.
On the way back, their charter plane stopped at Munich to refuel. Twice, takeoff had to be aborted because of heavy snow. As they prepared for a third attempt, nervous jokes gave way to genuine anxiety.
Little Johnny Berry said, I don't know what you're frickin' laughing for. We're all going to get killed here. And Liam Whelan said, well, if it happens, I'm ready to go. We started to roll, and I seen houses and I seen buildings I hadn't seen before. I watched the whole thing extend, and I watched the wheels come up. Daylight, darkness, no human noise of any kind. And the plane had broken completely and totally on the wings. And lying half in and half out of the wreckage was Dennis Violet and Bobby Charlton. Living or dead, I didn't know. I thought they were dead.
Here is the news. 2 years ago, 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 2 So far, we know there are 23 survivors after Manchester United's air crash at Munich this afternoon. The aircraft was a twin-engined Elizabethan on Charlton.
The first thing I remember was Arthur Crowther, who was the secretary at Leeds, coming in through the door, and he looked across, and he didn't look at me, he just looked at in general, and he said, the Manchester United plane's crashed. And everybody sort of looked at each other, and nobody took any notice of me, and I just stood there, and I didn't know where to look.
Well, I came home from school at around 4 with my mates. We got into the house, and the house was full of people.
And then about tea time it was when Ted Coburn, who has the post office up there, he came around and he was as white as a ghost, and I just said to him, "It's Bobby, isn't it?"
I remember that someone gave a strong drink. I think it was brandy. And Mother didn't drink. She never drank in her life. And that made her worse.
I phoned the wife, and we hadn't been married very long at that time. And I phoned her up, and I was trying to tell her, I burst into tears. I couldn't stop, you know. I was just, tears run down my face. I couldn't explain to her what I wanted to say. Anyway, she got the gist of it at the end, and I arranged to meet her at the station, and we got the first train to Newcastle. We got into Newcastle, and we got a taxi to the Haymarket. And there was a fellow stood with a pile of papers. And I don't know how far I was away from the fellow, but I looked at the papers, and I could see it from miles away. And all I could see was, among the survivors, Bobby Charlton and Harry Gregg. And we did a little dance in the middle of the Haymarket. You know, he's all right anyway, you know. I'd
like to say a few words to my mother. I hope she's okay.
Yes.
And taking it well.
Look at her while you're doing it.
She hasn't been down to see me, you know, but it's a bit long way and I'm all right.
I know.
If I'd have been a bit worse off, like some of the others.
Bobby came back from Munich, from hospital, and he came up to Washington. Didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone.
But later that week, Bobby was coaxed out of his seclusion.
Park School, where I used to go, I asked one of the teachers for a lane of a football. When I went to Bob's, and I says, "Bob, do you mind coming to the park and just, with me being a goalkeeper, just having a few shots and giving me a bit of practice?" I says, "And do you the world of good as well." He got the feeling back for the football again. He got the appetite back, I think. And he went back to his mother and he said, turned around and he said, "Mother, I want to go back to Manchester. I want to start playing football again."
3 weeks after a tragedy that had left 7 teammates dead, Bobby was playing again for Manchester United.
100,000 or so were there, and they fairly cheered Matt Busby. Then Bobby Charlton sets the ball rolling, and the match of the season is underway.
Remarkably, the patched-up team got all the way to the cup final against Bolton.
And after 8 minutes play, a fizzer from Charlton comes back off the post into Hopkinson's arms.
They lost, but it didn't matter. Bobby's courageous return to the game came at a price.
He'd gone out to Belgrade and Munich as a boy and came back a man. I think there must have been an inner turmoil because nobody could lose all his best friends in a crash of that magnitude and just carry on as if nothing had happened.
After Munich, he seemed to change. The carry-on of coming upstairs and frightening us kids and, you know, and getting on his back and running around, that didn't happen anymore. Well, survivor's guilt, I'm sure that he did feel that.
Robert was never the same lad to me after Munich. How it affected him, how it coloured his thinking, I don't know. But I saw a big change in our kid from that day on. He stopped smiling, a trait which continues to this day.
Pacific in mind, sir.
It's been a good relationship. We've had good times and bad times. There comes a time when you just have to move on. I just don't feel the same way as I used to. I'm sorry.
With Auto Trader, you'll find your perfect partner.
Deep in the Auvergne volcanic region lies the pretty French town of Volvic, home of Volvic natural mineral water. And because Volvic is naturally filtered through ancient volcanic rock, it inevitably picks up a little bit of volcano along the way, which may well explain a few things round here. No. Volvic, there's definitely something in the water.
Ah, shopping. Not just great fun, but great exercise. And like any vigorous activity, shopping can give you the occasional heart attack, which is why I always carry my life support system. Barclaycard's new price promise covers a range of items bought with your card. Find them cheaper elsewhere and they refund the difference. It's like pain in the wallet for a second there, but it's gone now, thanks.
Trouble, Peter?
No, just a bit lost.
Anyway, you're with Direct Line Rescue, aren't you?
Yeah.
Any good?
Dunno, I haven't called them out yet.
Must be galling paying for something you haven't used.
No, not really. They give a no call out discount. But I know they'll be there when I need them, wherever I am. Even here.
Direct Line Rescue. Now that's what you call a breakdown service.
Twice as nice, sexy and stylish, Volume 3. The UK's #1 garage and R&B club is back. Mixed by Steve Smooth Sutherland and yours truly, DJ Spoonie. Twice as Nice Volume 3 has the roughest garage, heaviest hip-hop and sweetest soul music. The slamming, the one and only Twice as Nice, Sexy and Stylish Volume 3. Get it now, you know you want it.
July 1966. The World Cup finals had come to England and there was nowhere else to be.
The public was caught up in it. There were World Cup songs, there were badges and flags, and anybody who could get a seat at Wembley was absolutely, they'd won the pools.
On the eve of the tournament, the fact that there were two brothers in the England team seized public attention. But what different routes they'd taken to get there. Bobby had been wearing his shirt since 1958.
I was captain of Scotland at Hampden Park, and Bobby made his debut. This was about 1958, and England beat us that day. Bobby scored an absolutely fantastic goal, a volley, nearly took the head off the goalkeeper with the shot, and that was his debut.
By 1966, he was at the height of his powers.
Of all the footballers I've ever seen, if you take his all-round game, his pace, his stamina, he could run forever, Bob. He had power shooting, left foot and right, and he could dribble. Now you put that together, you've got a pretty good footballer.
In the second game of the tournament, Bobby ignited England's World Cup ambitions with a stunning solo goal against Mexico.
That first goal he got against Mexico, I'll never forget it, from about 30 yards. And that really turned the spirits a little bit.
As ever, while Bobby had soared, Jack had clawed his way to the top. Leeds had toppled out of the First Division in 1960, and life in Division 2 was grim. To make matters worse for Jack, a fellow player, Don Revy, was made manager.
Jack was the only one that never called him boss, or used to call him Reevy, or Mr. Reevy.
When Don came into the dressing room at half-time, he was not best pleased. He pointed at me and said I should have picked up the centre-forward on the edge of the 18-yard box. I had a teacup in my hand and threw it against a wall. It missed Don by about a foot and smashed to pieces.
When he was dropped from the first team, Jack put in for a transfer. But Revie had other plans.
But I called him at the office and said, I feel that you've got enough ability, if you put your mind to it, to be an FA coach and go on to play for England. And I'll never forget, he laughed all over his face and said, oh yeah, that'll be the day.
Jack knuckled down and became a linchpin of the Revie game plan that would ultimately make Leeds a force to be reckoned with.
Big Jack owes a big debt to Don Revie because the big man was probably about 27, 28-year-old, not going very far with his career. And then Don Revie came in, and then the rest is history after that.
Once Jack was satisfied that someone was worth listening to, he'd listen. And once Jack started to listen, then you start to see things happen. Now, there aren't so many people in the world that could impress Jack, and Don Revie did impress him.
The call from England came in 1965. No one was more surprised than Jack himself.
I went straight round to the Man United dressing room and said, hey, I've been selected to play for England. I'm smiling all over my face, and there's all the Manchester United team sitting round looking miserable. There was a bit of a pause, and then Bobby went, oh, yeah, well, congratulations. Great.
He tells a wonderful story about he's talking to Alf Ramsey, and he said to Alf, you know, look Alf, I'm 30 years old, why are you picking me now? I'm so old. And Alf thought, well, Jack, I don't always pick the best players. And I think Jack was lost for words on that, you see, but he took it in good part.
It had been a long slog. Jack had finally caught up with his brother, just in time for the greatest moment in English footballing history. England won through to the semi-finals against Portugal. Although both his sons were playing, Bob Charlton Sr. worked his usual shift at the Ashington pit.
Dad was a true worker, and he was a true miner. And he was down the pit, even though his sons were playing for England.
He missed the Portugal game. But as soon as this was publicised, the BBC screened a repeat specially for Bob.
David Coleman come on, and he says, we're showing this special film for Mr. Charlton, as he is down the mine, 2 mile underground, and we're getting him out of the pit for to see this film that he was unfortunately he missed.
After 31 minutes, Pereira only half cleared. The ball went to Bobby Charlton, and Bobby Charlton's there with England's first. Jeff Hurst keeps possession, and Bobby Charlton's right there.
Bobby's goals had got England to the final. This time, Mum and Dad came to share the occasion.
Dad went to the final, but I didn't. My dad didn't like limelight. I think Mother did. It's fair to say that. She quite enjoyed it. There's nothing wrong with that. But Dad was a bit like me. He wanted not to be seen to be a hanger-on.
You have to remember, it was only 20 years after the war as well. A lot of people were so desperate for us to win.
It was this amazing occasion that was coming to us. And it happened, and it was an amazing match.
After all Bobby Charlton had done to get England to the final, on the day, it was another player who won the glory.
Ball passes to Hurst, and he scores England's third.
Bobby was stalemated by another football great.
Bobby's told me that Franz Beckenbauer had been told to mark Bobby Charlton all the time. Bobby Charlton had been told to mark Franz Beckenbauer. And so, as Bobby said, they trotted round for 90 minutes, as it were, not getting very much involved in the play, keeping an eye on each other.
Then with the crowd calling for time and the final whistle only seconds away, England get the ball upfield and Hurst goes through on his own.
The final whistle was very welcome. I saw Bob, he's got his hands in his face. He was in tears. And Big Jack and Bob, they give each other a hug. And Big Jack, he was on his knees, his head in his hands. He was absolutely done in and overcome. And we always remember this lap of honour. The crowd were absolutely beside themselves. The colour, the noise and the movement in the crowd was extraordinary.
How do you feel about things, Jackie?
Bobby.
Bobby, I'm sorry.
You don't have to ask me, really, do you?
What do you think of the game itself?
Very, very hard and tough.
The players and their families gathered at the Royal Garden Hotel for the official celebration. Sissy was there at the centre of things, but Jack's wife, Pat, was at home about to give birth at any moment. He was a free man in the big city, with sponsors' money to burn.
Jack comes out and he spots me. He says, "Jimmy, come, we're going out in the town, you and I." And he put his hand in his top pocket. He said, "I've got £100 for wearing Adidas boots." He said, "We'll spend this, we'll spend your tenner as well. We're off." And we went to the Astor Club, which at the time was popular with London footballers. We walk in and everybody stands up and applauds, and because it's England's World Cup hero. So we sit at a table and we'd hardly touch the seats when there's bottles of champagne and whiskey and all sorts of things flying over. We had a great night, various people coming across to talk to us. Next morning, back to the Royal Garden Hotel, where there were a group of news reporters saying, "Jack, any news of the baby? Because what a great story if the baby arrives when the day England's won the World Cup." So Jack said, no, nothing's happened yet. He hadn't got a clue whether it had or not. And then Sir Alf Ramsey came marching across the floor. "Jack, where have you been? We're due for a photo shoot. Where have you been? We're worried to death about you." He said, "Alf, fear not." And he put his hand in his pocket and he pulled out a card which said on it, "If found, please return this body to room 456 Royal Garden Hotel, Kensington."
While Bobby Charlton's footballing prowess had propelled him into the spotlight for the best part of a decade, he never looked happy there. But when the media glare finally settled on Jack, he was to flourish in it, eventually almost eclipsing his kid brother. Two weeks after winning the World Cup, the Charlton brothers returned to Beatrice Street to begin a triumphal tour of Ashington. Happy to be the working-class hero, Jack lapped up the acclaim, which Bobby merely endured.
Jack has always been the extrovert. Jack's always been very confident and quite free and easy with people. Bob's never been easy being in a crowd and being hustled around and pushed. He's a different character.
He is a shy man. He is very reserved. He still is shy, but he's less shy than he was.
While he was up in Ashington, Jack splashed out his World Cup winner's bonus on a new house for his mum and dad. They named it Jules Rimet after the trophy he'd just won.
I was delighted for mum and dad, and I lived with them for about a year. I actually made the name Jules Rimet on a piece of wood outside the door, and I got that made at the pit. Not supposed to say that.
Jack, it seemed, was a more family-orientated man in the sense that he looked after his mother and also his brothers. He was the one who kind of encouraged the family to bind as a unit.
Jack had married a down-to-earth Yorkshire lass who was happy in the bosom of the Charlton clan. Their wedding in 1958 was a proper family affair. Tom was impressed.
I went to Jack's wedding. I was very young. I remember thinking that Pat was absolutely gorgeous. And that was one of my lasting memories. I think I discovered that if you drank from the glass, the waiter came and filled it up. And I was given a glass of wine. Even at that age, I like to drink, yeah.
Jack, Pat and their 3 kids came up to Ashington often, and Pat was at home there.
In some ways, the wives are different. Pat is very much like Jack. This is what you get is what you see. Norma has tried to give Bobby more of the social graces.
Bobby had married Norma, a former model, in 1961. They had 2 daughters and enjoyed a life of quiet middle-class respectability in Bobby's adopted hometown, Manchester.
Bobby Charlton and Jack Charlton are 2 different types altogether.
Excuse me.
Nothing pleases Jack more than a pie and a pint in the pub with the lads. Bobby would be, what should I say, the more elegant type. He would maybe go to a restaurant. Bobby would be happier than the Savoy Hotel having a meal.
For all his comfortable lifestyle and success on the football field, there was still one ghost that Bobby Charlton had to exorcise: Munich. Since 1958, fellow crash survivor Matt Busby had added 2 more dazzling talents: George Best and Dennis Law.
Here's Clare onto Law, and it's there! Number 3 by Law. Manchester United versus Real Madrid.
League champions in 1967, Manchester United qualified for the European Cup again. They were now 2 games away from the final, just like 10 years before. United took their slender 1-0 lead to Madrid for the second leg. In the first half, Real were rampant. Then in the second half, George Best beat the fullback and crossed to the far post. Defender Bill Fowkes scrambled the ball home, the first time he'd crossed the halfway line. Manchester United had come back from the dead. They were in the final against Portuguese giants Benfica.
It became a crusade for Matt to win the European Cup. It was 10 years on from Munich. All the sort of things that you'd not allowed yourself to think about, how great it would be for the club to win, become the first English side, you know, to win the European Cup.
In memory of Munich, Busby made Bobby captain for the night.
Benfica in white kick off into the second half. No score in the first, no sign yet which way the pendulum would swing.
It had become more than a football match. It had become a dedication, I think, to the players, their teammates who had been killed at Munich, and also, of course, they were playing for Matt Busby because they knew how much it meant to him.
And now England's record-breaking scorer, Bobby Charlton, is to break the stalemate. A high pass from Sadler, and Bobby's head snicks it home. But there's still another, and it's number 2 for Bobby Charlton.
Manchester United had become the first English team to win the European Cup, but Bobby was so emotionally exhausted, he found it impossible to join in the celebrations.
And when they had their party afterwards, Bobby attempted to come down, but he never made it. Bobby's celebration of that European triumph was staying in his bedroom at the hotel while the party went on downstairs. That's the kind of man he was.
Leeds pressed in again.
Over at Leeds, Jack was at last getting a taste of the glory that Manchester United had enjoyed for so long. That same year, Leeds beat Manchester United 1-0 at Elland Road and went on to clinch the championship in 1969. Jack was the linchpin of the side.
He was like a policeman on duty. We all used to run round him, and the big man used to be stood there in the middle, waving his arms around, telling us what to do.
Jack used to bowl you out every game. I mean, that was nothing new for Jack to bowl you out. Jack would always go into people. That was part of his make-up.
Oh, and on the blind side of Cooper without seeing it. And Jack Charlton is giving his defence a fair bit of stick there.
With Jack at its heart, the Leeds team were a tough, at times brutal outfit. While Man United were widely loved, Leeds were almost universally loathed.
Well, we weren't well liked, that's for sure. We probably bent the rules a little bit and got stuck in a bit more than we probably should have done. Well, you touched one of us, and you touched us all. That was the way we played, and that was how we were together. Didn't have to be me or Jack or anybody. It was just a little nod between each other.
1969 turned out to be Jack's sole championship. Leeds were runners-up on 5 occasions. No one outside West Yorkshire shed a tear. Europe too proved a barren hunting ground.
We never won the European Cup. I mean, it was a great achievement. Manchester United won the European Cup in '68. We probably should have won it. I think that was a big disappointment.
I'm sure that Jack Charlton resented the glamour that Manchester United enjoyed. It must have made the Leeds players feel that they were sort of working class as opposed to the gentry over at Old Trafford. But that's how it was. There's no escaping from it, and it's only a human reaction if Jack felt a little envious and resentful.
In the end, Jack overplayed his role as enforcer. In 1970, he revealed his own systematic approach to revenge and retribution.
There are 2 or 3 knocking about who have done it to me, and I will make them suffer before I pack this game in. Well, we can't mention names, but I've got a little book with 2 names in it, you know, and if I get a chance to do them, I will.
I remember thinking, sitting in the audience, that maybe you shouldn't have said that. That might not have been a really clever thing to say.
The Football Association was forced to act, and Jack was summoned to Lancaster Gate to eat humble pie.
I apologise for the fact that through me, the press was given an opportunity to knock football.
The Black Book incident would come back to haunt him in the years ahead. Jack and Bobby both retired as players on the last day of the 1973 season. Bobby left as he had arrived, trailing clouds of glory.
It was his last year at Old Trafford, and he felt himself that his best years were behind him. And no one pushed him into it at all. He made my job very, very easy at Old Trafford because he felt he had given his best. And he also felt that he wanted to retire at the top.
But Jack, despite playing till 37, was still hungry for success. It was only now, off the field, that he'd finally be able to step out from his kid brother's shadow.
You'll catch him if you rush.
After retiring as players, both Jack and Bobby became football managers at second division clubs. Jack took over Middlesbrough. Bobby went into management at Preston North End. The arrival of a star like Bobby Charlton caused great excitement in the town.
I had pre-knowledge of it because with my stepfather being on the board, he came back one night, you know, and I said, "Where have you been?" He went, "Just been to sign the new manager." I said, "Who is it? Who is it?" And he went, "Oh, can't tell you, can't tell you." I went, "No, go and tell me." He went, "Don't tell anybody." He said, "Bobby Charlton."
Reflected glory was about all Bobby had to offer his struggling side. He hid away from his managerial responsibilities by training with the apprentices.
I heard a noise coming from up the stairs where the tea room was, and I walked in, and there was the young kids, the young apprentices, playing head tennis with Bobby. So I introduced myself, and the first thing he said to me, "Get changed. You can come on my side with one short."
I just got the impression with Bobby that he'd kind of rather train with the youngsters. I think with the older players and with the first team, it just all seemed a bit of a chore for him.
Preston only won 6 out of their first 20 games. Bobby didn't seem to have the drive to turn things round. He just wasn't a natural leader.
Bobby was very, very nervy. For a man who'd won a World Cup at times as well, when he gave a team talk and wanted the team to play in a certain way and use different players in different positions, it was just so obvious that he didn't enjoy it.
I see a little bit less of my family. Apart from that, it's pretty much what I expected. Even the worries, I think I expected a little of those, and I've had a few, but not many. I've enjoyed it basically, but it takes a lot of your time up. That's all I find.
Over at Middlesbrough, Jack took to management like a duck to water. He was charismatic, confident and relaxed.
Jack had such a big personality, and he had such confidence in his ability, and he never ever showed any signs that he found the job difficult. Jack would turn up on a Saturday at 2:30, speak for 2 or 3 minutes, and we'd go out and win the game. He didn't put a lot of hours into the job, but it worked. And if it works, that's all that matters.
Get the drop on the enemy news.
With Jack and Bobby vying in the same league, the possibility of a family derby excited the media, and Jack welcomed the cameras in with open arms.
Really, it's Middlesbrough versus Preston. It's not Bobby versus Jack. We'll be sat on about 10 yards away from each other, looking along each other and grimacing and pulling faces and going, oh dear, you know.
I hope that it'll be a lot easier for me to motivate the players this weekend than normal.
But it wasn't. When the two teams played that weekend, Middlesbrough won at a canter, 4-2. Preston were relegated to the 3rd Division. The board at Preston had so little confidence in Bobby, they tried to sell John Bird behind his back the next season.
He said, you're staying at this club. You're my club skipper. And he said, I know I'm probably blocking you going higher up. He says, but we are going to build a team here. We are going to get back up there. And he said, if they do sell you, I'm resigning. And they were the exact words he said.
The board refused to back down, and Bobby resigned.
It was an opportunity for him to say, look, you know, thanks for giving me the opportunity of being a manager, but no, I want to walk away from it and do something else in my life.
A great day at Ayresome Park. The Middlesbrough team take the field as 2nd Division champions.
Middlesbrough, in contrast, won promotion to the 1st Division. It had been a brilliant start to Jack's career as a manager. Jack went on to manage Sheffield Wednesday and Newcastle with equal success. Never tying himself down with a contract, he could pack it in when things weren't going his way.
I don't need it. You know, I thought I was wanted here. When I found out I wasn't, I told him when I came, you know, the day you don't want me, tell me and I'll leave. And I did.
In any case, he always seemed to have other things he could be getting on with. He could be relaxed about working because he'd always had the knack of making money.
I've always been a good earner. Since I was that high, if you asked me, Mother, she'd tell you. I mean, I'd chop sticks, I would pinch people's cabbages and sell them around the front door.
But there was one job Jack did think it was worth applying for: England manager. As a distinguished former international and successful club manager, he should at least have been a contender. But the Black Book incident cost him dear.
Not only did he not get it, he didn't even get a reply. And the hurt of that, I think, stayed with him for years and years.
You could read in his face that it was hurtful. It was hurtful that he hadn't had a reply and that he hadn't been treated the way he was expecting to be treated and that he deserved and really should have been treated.
But the Irish FA, with a far less glorious football tradition than England, were prepared to take a risk on Jack as a manager.
And I got friendly with somebody on the Irish FA and said, we're going to give the job to Jack. Do you know where he is? And I said, yes, I'll find him for you. So I rung up Jack and I said to him, congratulations, if you want it. He said, what do you mean? I said, you've got the Irish job.
He strolled into the job in his usual relaxed style.
He inherited a shambles, a tactical and organisational and disciplinary shambles. So he projected an image of authority, which was welcome.
It breezed into the room and it was like, right, you're playing here, you're playing there, you're doing this and you're doing that. Any questions? And everyone, no Jack, no Jack, no Jack.
He had a very sound, if not very imaginative, tactical system, which was basically to put the other side under pressure, to use the long ball, and to play to what might be regarded as the strengths of players in these islands.
David O'Leary, a defender like Jack himself, only much more skillful, didn't fit in with his plans.
Jack didn't like footballing centre-halves. He didn't like people fanning around at the back with the ball, because they might lose it, give a goal away. So David wasn't his style of player.
Jack dropped O'Leary, only to recall him to the team for a friendly tournament to cover for injured players.
David said, I've booked my family holiday, I'm not prepared to do it for a friendly tournament. And Jack said, OK, and that's you finished.
He was totally out of order, banning me for 3 years, you know, and he knows that. But he's that stubborn and pig-headed he wouldn't admit it. But the bottom line is, you know, what he'd done wasn't right, and most of Ireland knew it.
He has a bully's attitude to life, and he doesn't like being crossed. And if you crossed him, then it was a problem.
But Jack was pragmatic enough to bring O'Leary back when he needed him for the World Cup finals in Italy in 1990, the first time Ireland had ever qualified.
One thing I would say about him, he did bring me back, and we had a great World Cup.
The World Cup was a chance for Jack to show the English football establishment, including brother Bobby, what they'd missed. England's first match in the tournament was against Ireland.
The phone rang as I sat in my hotel bedroom in Sardinia just 24 hours before we opened our 1990 World Cup programme against England. It was our kid. "What are you ringing for?" I asked. My reaction seemed to surprise him as much as his call had surprised me. It showed how distant the two of us had become.
Well, the moment seems to have been a long time coming. The Republic of Ireland in the green shirts, playing from right to left.
Jack, in spite of being an Englishman, would want the Republic to win and nothing else, and would enjoy that to the full. And it was just a bit of a battle between all these large bouts of aggression. We tried to play a bit of football in between, which wasn't easy. And it wasn't the greatest of games. It wasn't a great game of football.
England scored first, they got the goal, and you know, it was a mistake really on our part. Gary Lineker finished it, and it was 1-0. And then Packy, the goalkeeper, got a ball, and just the long ball, as they used to say, we played with. Kevin Sheedy got control of the ball, and he struck a beautiful left-footed shot right into the corner, and that was the equaliser.
It finished as a draw.
Republic are back in it at 1-1.
Having tweaked the nose of the English, Jack's team set about qualifying for the quarter-finals for the first time in their history. In the end, it all came down to penalties against Romania. Packy Bonner's save ironically left O'Leary needing to score to put Ireland through.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't like to be in David O'Leary's shoes here. He's not really a penalty taker.
There was about 20,000 green and white scarves behind that goal, all still, all ready to explode.
Ireland!
The ball hit the net, you know, the colour, the explosion behind it. Biggest mistake, stopped still, nearly got killed.
Ireland lost to host nation Italy in the quarter-finals, but just to have got that far was a fantastic achievement. The Irish had a new patron saint, and Jack had nothing left to prove.
Pass it, don't be greedy!
While her famous footballing sons had lived their lives in the public eye, back in Ashington, Sissy Charlton kept in touch with the game she loved by coaching local kids.
It'll go where you want it if you hit it like that. But if you hit it on the top of your head, it just goes anyway.
It was part of life, all of her life, having people's kids, relatives' kids, neighbours' kids. And to go to the school and help with the little kids there was quite normal, quite natural for my mother. I used to tell her to try and slow down because she was very old and she was trying to kick a football around. And the kids absolutely loved it. The kids idolised my mother. I used to sit for hours talking to Mum about the boys and about the life in the past and that, and we would reminisce, and she'd love to do that.
And the resurrection to eternal life.
In 1996, Sissy Charlton died. Her 4 sons carried her into the church. 6 months later, Jack published his autobiography, in which he criticised his brother Bobby's behaviour.
For 6 or 7 years before she died, my mother saw little, if anything, of our Robert. She desperately wanted him to go and see her, but he never did.
Bobby Charlton was tremendously, and still is to this day, upset with the remarks made by Jack Charlton, who I think was completely out of order in making such remarks.
What Jack wanted to say was what Jack wanted to say. It wasn't what I wanted to say. I think I would have preferred if it hadn't happened, if it hadn't been the way it was in the book, probably said it the way it was. I would have probably liked it to have been different to that, but it wasn't. And it's a fact.
Jack can't forgive Bobby for staying away. And Bobby can't forgive Jack for letting it all out into the open.
They're brothers. You know, it's up to them. I'd like to say to them, hey, come on, lads, shake hands, kiss and make up, what the hell, you know, we're grown people. Why are you like this? But there is a rift between them, and it's just sad to see.
And Bobby Charlton's right there. Watch Bobby Charlton, as with the ball at his feet, he shoots. That's Charlton!
Details of next week's football stories coming up in a moment. And this weekend, Channel 4 uncovers the truth behind a project that's become a fiasco. Wembley, a football farce, is on Saturday at 6:40. Well, next on 4, could it be Crilly on the telly? Heaven knows, in Father Ted.
As a player, he led Liverpool to 3 championship titles.
He scored a lot of vital goals for us. He scored.
Would we point to an inventor on the street? Would we ask for their autograph? Probably not. But then it's not about being famous. It's about being an inventor.
Make yours Funkology.
Express yourself.